Yes, because you've been
This is
ranting about
all they're talking about. They're not talking about supporting you, the small business owner. They're not talking about the struggles that you're still having. The SBA hasn't learned anything from that experience. Let's talk about fraud. OIG, not OMG, but it might as well be OMG. SBA's Office of Inspector General. Little background on OIG. Each government agency has an Office of Inspector General. The purpose of that office is to do things like check out efficiencies, how operations are running properly and within the law, compliance with the law as set forth by the Congress of the United States. But another aspect of the OIG is the criminal aspect, where they investigate vendors, lenders. In the case of like the FHA, HUD, OIG, they investigate mortgage companies and banks. In this case, the OIG for the SBA is spending a lot of time investigating and a lot of money investigating COVID-19 EIDL loans. He's got this report, which we're going to pull up. We're going to give you a link for it, but also this is a copy of my Google alerts from June 28th.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
10 headlines. So out of all these 10, 9 out of 10 headlines are about fraud. OIG, in my experience of 30 years in the mortgage industry, I have seen federal investigations of banks and mortgage companies. I have an old professional colleague from the Federal Housing Administration, the guy who used to underwrite my mortgage loans back in the early 1990s at 26 Federal Plaza, who later went on to a successful career working for HUD's OIG. And the one thing I know about OIG for all of government agencies is typically they work behind the scenes. They're off camera. They send their reports to Congress and to the Department of Justice and to the relevant agency. They don't really go on 60 Minutes and CBS Sunday Morning and et cetera, et cetera. Apparently, SBA's OIG does. And if you Google it, you'll see him because he's a good-looking guy and he's well-spoken. I'll give him credit for that. But what I won't give him or his agency, his group, credit for is this screaming fire in a crowded movie theater aspect of focusing everybody's attention on fraud and 4 million loans of COVID-19 EIDL, because I wanted to point out that this OIG claims that there's potentially 200 billion potentially fraudulent amount. Now, of course, he's talking about not just EIDL, he's talking about PPP loans and all the other stuff, which was, as we'll see in a moment, which was,
that the SBA facilitated.
The $1.2 trillion. But he's saying $200 billion is potentially fraudulent, which, again, it's all of the programs, but still, that's roughly half of the $390 billion. That is statistically impossible that half of the program was perpetrated for fraudulent criminal means. I don't believe it. The reason I don't believe it, we're going to get into a moment about SBA's inability to recognize fraud and statements made in the media by this OIG person, the Office of Inspector General, about you, small business owners. These folks are so out of touch with how you actually run your business on a day-to-day basis that they don't even understand basic documents or basic trends in the business.
Practices with managing or navigating simple technology, whether it's a phone or a computer or the laptop.
In this, what I call fraud landscape, the number of indictments, the first page, by the OIG through the Justice Department, they recommend this information to the Department of Justice, who then, the FBI and the Department of Justice, the United States Attorney, then prosecutes it. 1,011 indictments, 803 arrests, and 529 convictions. I'm sorry, what's the percentage? 529 convictions out of 4 million EIDL loans. And this says 529 convictions, not just for the EIDL program. This is also for PPP and other aspects. Going back to the COVID pandemic process, which we helped thousands of small business owners, gave away lots of free information here on our YouTube channel. If you were one of the lucky ones in the early days of the pandemic in April, May, June 2020, and you went on to the internet and you applied for your COVID-19 EIDL and you got the $10,000 grant, you got your loan with no muss, no fuss, we're very happy for you. But all the rest of you and us as consultants and representatives, advocates who had to deal with the Small Business Administration to get an original application processed and approved because of a mistake or a document that needed to be submitted or a technical glitch or a loan that was declined and then we requested it to be reconsidered for an approval, or a loan that was requesting an increase. If you had to go through that horrible experience, then you know how dysfunctional the SBA was. What the SBA and the Office of Inspector General considers as fraudulent activities.
Oh, I've got a bunch of screenshots.
Here's the biggest issue is hold code. When an SBA person thinks that the applicant or the borrower is potentially participating in fraudulent activity, they internally flag the file. They will never tell you your file is flagged.
That's key to know, because you don't know.
Actually, we had somebody recently who told us, the SBA person said, yes, your file is flagged, but I can't tell you why. During the pandemic, while processing loans, I spoke to hundreds of SBA agents, maybe thousands. And one SBA agent, I remember, was a fellow a little older than I am. He was on his third career. His first career, he was an FBI agent. His second career, he worked in banking. And his third career was working for the Small Business Administration. Trevor, he said, there are people around here in this office who will flag a file in a heartbeat.
Oh, I got a banner
because
for
they
that.
don't understand something. Knee-jerk reaction. Internet IP addresses, which means a consultant like us or a CPA like David may submit applications from multiple clients from their office, from their IP address, and the SBA considers that fraudulent activity. Employer identification numbers that are incorrect happens all the time. You know why? Because during the pandemic, people were locked in their houses and not everybody has a laptop anymore. People were submitting their EIDL applications on these with their little fingers typing in. And so they made mistakes typing in their name of their business, their address of their business, and their EIN number. And instead of assuming that people were rushing and making mistakes, the SBA thinks they're committing fraud. Bank accounts, we know that banks were closing accounts on people left, right, and center, especially these poor sole proprietors like Uber drivers and moms who were cleaning houses, who had a Schedule C income, and their bank said, you don't have enough money in the account, we're closing you down. But they had put that bank account in their EIDL application. So they tried to tell SBA would change the application. SBA goes, oh, that's fraud. Here's another one. Defaulted PPP loan who did not request forgiveness. A lot of people don't realize what the deadlines are. The fact that people haven't applied for forgiveness because they're so busy trying to keep their business alive, or they don't know that they can still apply for forgiveness, doesn't mean they committed fraud. And the fact that they defaulted on a PPP loan doesn't mean that they committed fraud. It means they went out of business. They can't afford to make the payment even though it's a 1% interest rate. Do you see this pattern here? How OIG for the SBA and the SBA itself thinks that all of you all are committing crimes, when in fact you're just trying to survive out here. I love this one. Sole proprietors and independent contractors without EINs. A nation of sole proprietors. They don't have EINs, SBA. They've got Social Security numbers and they file their income on their personal tax return on a Schedule C. And because they file that way, you all at the SBA think they committed fraud. Okay, suspicious phone numbers, suspicious physical addresses. I had one client late 2020, early 2021, who told me that he spoke to the SBA. They declined his loan because his business was located in a building with other offices. And they suspected fraud because how could so many different businesses be at one address? I'm sorry, SBA, have you heard of a new thing? It's called an office building.